Perfect. Well, welcome everyone to the Forest Health Council Committee on Leveraging Resources. I believe we do have a quorum to get started. And just to open things up for today, we're going to spend most of our day focusing on the recommendation that we've been discussing over the last few months to potentially recommend a pre-fire playbook. So we're going to focus our attention there, and I'll walk through some of the pieces of our agenda. We'll start with some of our housekeeping, taking a vote to accept our meeting minutes from the last meeting. But to dive in, Brett Wolk has offered to do a setting the stage presentation to really talk about how do communities use modeling tools and some of the social processes in establishing pre-fire planning, just to help us set the stage of what could a pre-fire playbook look like. And then we'll spend a decent amount of our time really diving into whether we can build some consensus on a purpose, goal, and audience for a potential recommendation to consider by this group. Spend a good amount of our time there, and then we'll wrap up with a quick update from Katie, who I see just jumped on a proposal that the CSU Warner College of Natural Resources has been working on for some funding to build collaborative capacity. So I'm excited for Katie to give us a quick update on that. I think it was just submitted last Thursday, and I think Brett might touch on that just a bit, and then we'll wrap up from there. So we've got quite an agenda today. But just to get going, I wanted to mention one aspect that we discussed last meeting was including a purpose statement at the top of our agenda that includes just our connection to the legislative intent of the Forest Health Council and what this committee has been focused on. So instead of spending a lot of time there, if you have comments on how that's worded, please feel free to send that to me and we can continue to make edits to that. But in lieu of creating a full charter for our committee, we opted just to include that purpose statement on top of our agendas to keep us coordinated on our responsibilities and how we're connected to the roles and responsibilities of the full council. So I just wanted to note that there. Again, just feel free to send me any feedback on that. And then you have linked to your email from late last week, the meeting minutes from our February meeting. So to get that adopted by the committee, do I have a recommendation to adopt the meeting minutes from February?
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
Great. Moved by Christina and seconded by Christy. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Any comments? All right, we'll go ahead and move those forward and adopt the meeting minutes. And Brett, I think I'm going to quickly turn it over to you just to give us that presentation.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. So I have some notes written down. I have to be honest, I'm not quite on my best today and really ready to give this presentation. I've been, my father just got out of the hospital and I've been doing some care this weekend and didn't get around to getting as prepared as I want, but I think we can get through some things. So let's see. I think the goal was to I think bring everybody up to speed on what some of these technical tools are out there that people are using. And I think what this committee and what we've been working on is really, here, let me see if I can share my screen. All right, can you guys see the screen or do you see my notes?
I see your notes and the screen.
Yeah. There we go.
Is that better?
That's great.
All right. So this was one of the, legislatively created context for which this committee is working on for leveraging resources. And then we've talked about two things to work on that of this pre-fire forest health playbook, and then also the statewide forest activities database. So just kind of putting that in context, those are the two main things we've talked about that I think really play well together as far as trying to even the playing field as much as we can to give people resources across the state to do these activities and forest health planning. So the main thing is there's lots of things out there, lots of complex decisions people are making about forest health and lots of things that go into that. And so this is kind of skip through this, simplifying these complex decisions are really what these tools are about. They're not making a decision for you. They are really helping simplify decisions so people can make them. The science never has the answer. I'm sorry, this is kind of, like I said, out of order. A lot of the decision scale is really important at where these tools work. And most of the time, we're talking about these larger scales and not talking about what's going to happen on these 100 acres, but it's more larger planning. A lot of the way these tools work is based on a lot of tools that people are currently using. There's lots of tools out there. Is based on this general technical report from the Rocky Mountain Research Station out in 2013. That is a wildfire risk assessment framework for land and resource management planning. And the first component is a risk assessment of identifying where your risk is on the landscape. And that's where the technical fire modeling comes in, the mapping of all of the resources that you are trying to manage around. And so this is a framework that was designed to put that through. And then the decision support is where it helps people make decisions. And this is a thing that CFRI has developed where you have the risk assessment as one component, but then you talk about actually those treatment feasibilities of what slopes and where you can put things together, the treatment costs, and put some constraints on where things happen. So this is a little bit of the technical modeling. And the way that it works a lot is this is what it looks like when you get a list of all of your resources. HVRA stands for highly valued resources and assets. So you can see all of these listed there that each group can list. And then you rank their relative importance as a group, right? So this is where the science kind of meets the social side of things. And you can make a list of your shared values and your shared priorities, right? And that's the outcome of this exercise, where you're marrying, again, the technical analysis with the social and collaborative process. And then the outcome of that, this is an example that I worked on with Chaffee County that most of you know of, is a map of where people can say, yes, this is where we're going to work together. And I think this is what a lot of us are talking about in a pre-fire context, as well as a during fire context, with how do you give this information to fire incident commanders to protect forest health and resources, as often incident commanders sometimes are local, but often in larger incidents come in from out of state or just out of the local region, as well as the post-fire context. The same concept has been used in lots of areas after fire, where to prioritize mulching on hillsides or other forest health and emergency services. So a little bit on the during fire pods. It's the same concept where you have the fire modeling, and there's some products there of the analytical methods combined with that local expertise of actually drawing lines on a map. And then it's combined together to understand where, if a fire happens on anywhere in the landscape, what's our actions going to be? Where's the most likely chance of success? And how are we going to manage different fires in different areas? So in some places you might say, if a fire starts here, we'll manage it to this area. if some fire starts in another condition, you might take different actions. So I made a very quick list. There's all kinds of existing resources that are already out there that have used these similar processes. A state forest action plan, right? All of these from different scales. Some of these are at statewide scales, and some of them are at community wildfire protection plans, are usually at the level of a county or smaller. Watershed wildfire protection plans are based on watershed boundaries. And there's other things out there as well that are also align some of these technical expertise with social processes, such as fire adapted communities frameworks of how to organize communities, best actions to protect homes, prepare people for evacuation, things like that. So there's lots of different tools out there. I think one tool that we have been going and developing and is gaining some attention on the social side to align these technical tools with the social processes is a concept called the stages of collaborative readiness. And there's actually 4 different stages we're identifying from that have particular components that we can identify. And this is sort of still in development, but coming along, developing quicker, that could help identify which resources to give to which communities around the state. Some people want and need more help with just facilitation and coordination. Some people need money right now for doing treatments and active forest management. And there's different resources and grant programs that I think could be informed by this framework that really helps align the technical and the social processes. So I'm sorry, that's not everything that I hoped to present, and I'm happy to kind of answer questions. And I have plenty of other slides and things that I can bring up as questions come up. I'll also note Chaska Hoiwaka is on the call as a support staff with me that has helped develop stages of readiness and some of these other things. So I think I'll open it up for questions. And I don't know, Amy, if we want to set some more context of sort of what we had hoped to do with this session.
Yeah, no, thanks, Brett. I really appreciate you giving that presentation and being here today. And I thought it was great to set the stage for us. And I think happy to open it up for questions, but helping to have Brett really set the stage of, what are some of the existing processes and tools that are out there for pre-fire planning? And as we then transition into looking at this pre-fire playbook, looking at how do we use all of the expertise in this subcommittee and the Forest Health Council at large to recommend how do we improve existing processes or really direct communities to know where to start. So feel free just to, John, I see your hand raised. Others either just unmute and ask questions, and I'll keep an eye out for hands as well. But go ahead, John.
Yeah, so I guess it comes down to what do we want to do? I think I talked about this in the last one too. And thanks, Brett, for that information. I think we really need is something like a workflow, right? So if a community, a private landowner, a municipality, county, whatever, if they wanted to get into the forest treatment game, how do they do it? So what's step one? Talk to these people. Where to look at for information of where the best piece or the best piece of land to do the treatment on? I mean, I think we'll get the biggest buck. It's not so much a decision matrix, because like Brett said, that's not what we're there to do, but how do you get from step A to doing a treatment? What's that in between, all that in between work that you need to do? And I think that's what this committee could probably help with. And that's my thought.
Yeah, I think that's my thought too, John. Let me see. Why don't you go ahead, Hillary, and then maybe I'll jump in.
So we're going through this right now for our upper watershed And we actually just recently started looking more at the Wildfire Ready Watershed tool that, we all heard about recently, as maybe a sort of guiding process, and going to talk to Chris here soon. But I think just in response to John's comment, I guess the way my experience with it at the local level has been, recognizing that these risks are increasing, and that we highly value our forests. They're part of, not only our environment, but our economy and our ecological resilience, et cetera. And when I recognized that we weren't, when the Forest Service approached me, and State Forest Service to some degree, saying, are we ever going to be able to do a treatment in your region, or is everybody just always going to be opposed? And so we got together a couple of years ago, brought in Jason Seibold, and did a whole analysis and modeling of the forest health, so forest conditions in our upper watershed. And that was the first step, to really understand what was going on, what are our threats, what are our current conditions, and then what are the modeled conditions according to this optimization, GIS optimization that Jason and his team at CSU customized for us. That started catching people's attention. We put together the first storybook that the county has ever seen, and or our GIS storybook, and that really started catching people's attention of, oh, if we do nothing, which is the approach that this region has preferred for many, many years, this is what could happen. And then also we identified our communities at risk, and there was a big red flag on basically one of our biggest upper watershed communities. So it took that first step of really understanding the existing and modeled conditions for us to want to, or for us to decide to continue to move forward and figure out what kind of actions we could take. Now, this region is maybe somewhat unique. Maybe other communities are ready to jump right into treatment. Maybe, with the fires we've seen in Colorado, everybody equates, treatment to forest health. I'm not sure that's the case. And, I think the Wildfire Ready Watershed sort of addresses some of that. Some of our watersheds are more wildfire ready in their natural conditions than others. So I guess I just don't want us to skip that step of what does a community do when they're ready to treat? And so this is what we're doing now is we actually came up with a treatment that was identified through that process. We went through the analysis of that treatment, and it was determined that that treatment wasn't really feasible. That number one, crown fires could jump pretty quickly over any treatment that we did other than clear cutting the hillside, and nobody wanted to do that. And that we would dump $25,000 an acre. That's what the treatment would cost, because it'd be helicopter logging into it, and it might not be effective. So it wasn't worth it. So we scaled it back to more sort of site specific and defensive space type of treatment. And now we're moving on to, okay, what's next? And now we need a tool to get us there. We need to understand, the conditions of our watershed, the conditions of our forests, and potentially some wildfire modeling to really understand with the latest, greatest, best science, what areas make sense to treat to protect the values that we identify, which are generally the community and the watershed. And so now we're looking for that tool, that sort of science to to make informed decision makers in the region, either updating our storybook, which is now 5 years old and proven to be, it's proven to be not as, it's proven to be too conservative. Unfortunately, conditions are changing way faster, and we're seeing more worsening conditions on the forest thanks to climate change. So we either need to update that, or we need to, maybe go through the framework of wildfire ready watersheds. We were told a year ago that CFRI had a waiting list, and we just didn't want to wait. But here we are, we'll probably be ready to go by the time the waiting list is up. So I don't know if that helps. That's just talking through and there is no easy solution here, because we haven't figured it out either, and we keep talking in circles in every meeting. And we just need sort of that collaborative leadership, which we're struggling with at the local level. And then we need the tools, because my community lives in a place where we believe strongly in science, and we want science to guide our decision making. And we don't know where we're going to get that information. So now we're out interviewing all the different tools that are available. So I guess that's what, going through this process, it would have been helpful to I guess say, well, the Colorado Forest Health Council put together this list of resources that are available. Here's the funding available for planning. Here's the collaboration, maybe expertise that we should have signed up with a while ago. And then here's sort of the science tools that are available to you to use. I don't know if that's helpful, but we're learning on the fly, and it's hard. We're not getting anywhere very fast.
Thanks, Hillary. I think that perspective is really helpful for us to consider what might be useful in this context. But Brett, did you want to respond to John and some of Hillary's comments too?
Yeah, I think this is what can the Forest Health Council do for everyone across the state? Because, Commissioner Cooper is in a very different spot than Commissioner Shattuck McNally in Larimer County, that has lots of other, it's not even as much about the financial resources, it's about the technical and collaborative capacity resources that is why people are in different stages and different, places in this field. And so I don't know what would be, just having a huge list of here's all the options to do. I think what I've been thinking about, and where this sort of stages of readiness concept and some other things we've been doing goes, is how do you help people develop a framework to make decisions when they're being thrown 10 different technical tools and sold different tools by, we think what we do is pretty good, but there's all other consulting firms out there. There's other federal, state agencies. There's lots of things out there, right? How does someone like a county commissioner or a local government make a decision about what's actually going to be, the right process for your area? Because every area looks a little different. So I think that's what I'm going to do. I could show just 2 really quick slides to get everybody up to speed on a little bit of the stages of readiness, if that would help, as far as a collaborative process.
I think that's a great idea, Brett. And while you pull those up, Commissioner Shattuck McNally, do you want to add a comment?
Yeah, if I could real quick, I don't know if it's right spot, but I wanted to share, I heard us say that, all these companies offering resources and things, but one thing I haven't seen this group talk about, the work that I'm doing with NOCO Places 2050 is that Codex tool that has all those layers, and that's all free. And I haven't seen that really mentioned, or maybe I have forgotten we mentioned that in this committee. And that shows a lot of different layers that you can lay on top of this map for wildfire risk and other things. And I thought maybe that's a tool that we should at least help others know it's free. You can make a free account, and anyone, including decision makers, could use that and I don't know what Brett and others think about it, but I think it's a really, oh, there it is. Cool. I guess I missed it.
But
Did I miss you?
that's the thing.
Did
I
I
think
mention,
that-
I'm sorry if you mentioned that, I forgot, I wasn't quite hearing, I had some phone calls come in at the same time, but I think that it's something that I find helpful now with even us purchasing properties and our work, so I'm just curious about helping others understand that's free and stuff, so thank you for letting me talk, and I'm sorry if I missed that.
No, I went over it really quick. I think that's just the thing, is that there's so many, we're not data poor. There is too much data out in this world. It's helping people make sense of all of the data that's out there. I think that's where people are struggling. So yeah, that's, Codex is a great resource for also bringing in more of the Colorado Parks and Wildlife is using that in their regional planning forums and things like that. Right, but that's a great nexus.
Matt, did you have a comment, and can you introduce yourself for the group?
Yeah, thank you. My name is Matt Nickel. I work with the National Forest Foundation in Chaffee and Lake counties, and we've benefited a lot from Brett and CFRI, given the mapping that we've done here. And I think Brett's right about, like, we're not data poor, and there's a lot out there. The one thing I would add to that, though, and I should caveat all this. I started my position last April, so I'm still relatively new. But I would say that in retrospect in Chaffee County, one thing that I think is important that we didn't either have the best data to rely on or didn't have, I think if we could go back and do it, I think we would, is, and it will vary across Colorado, but particularly in Chaffee County, when you're looking at private land, private forested land, and addressing fire concern, from what I have seen, those private landowners tend to be second homeowners, non-year round, generally on the wealthy end of the spectrum. And we don't really have a good way of kind of modeling and mapping where sort of like the lower income landowners might be that we would want to prioritize public funding for treatments. And trying to address that equity issue. And I think lots of different places across the state are trying to address that issue, and it's really tricky. Different conservation districts, different counties. I know Brett and I have talked about it too. We're trying to do what we can in Chaffee County to kind of get at that, but it's a really tricky riddle to solve. And yeah, I guess I just flagged that as folks are starting to think about their own plans. Like, how do you kind of direct those public funds to the folks who need it the most, whereas other private landowners who may have their own resources to do this sort of treatment can, fund it themselves, that sort of thing. So I just flagged that as something that we've noticed in Chaffee County.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that perspective, Matt. That's interesting. Brett, do you want to pull up those slides as I keep calling on others?
Sure.
We can turn it to you, and then I can share my screen with some of the purpose, goal, and audience language to help us see if we can build some consensus and fine tune a recommendation.
Yeah, and I do see Diana Selby from the State Forest Service is on the call of, I know with the 4RM grants, they are using a social vulnerability index of, I think, to help with that. So that's a great conversation to have at some point as well.
Yeah, I can explain that. So we, as part of the Furworm Grant Program, we were in legislation asked to look at areas of fewer economic resources and have them have a lower match for the program. So we had a team between the Department of Ag and Resource Economics at CSU and then Rocky Mountain Research Station sort of work together and develop a social vulnerability index. And that is on our forest action plan. So in the different applications you can look at, you can see that. Our feedback is that it's okay. It's not, it doesn't address every, it's really hard to get to a point where everyone's going to agree that, the index is exactly right on. However, we did look at it's a finer scale than like a county level scale. So we think it's pretty solid, and we've done, you know, some re-looking at it, had some additional analysis and study based on, you know, feedback on the resources. And so we're going to continue to use that layer. And again, I know that there's a lot, as Brett said, there's a lot of resources out there. I think the tricky part is that a variety of different organizations have requirements for these tools. So for example, the Colorado State Forest Service, we're required to produce the Forest Action Plan. So we developed this plan in partnership with a variety of stakeholders across the state. And we have to use that, you know, that's kind of the intent, is that we're using our Forest Action Plan to guide our work of where we're going to focus our work. That might be different from what U.S. Forest Service puts together for something that they're told by the Washington office they need to develop. So again, it's because of, you know, the sort of guiding some of these different organizations, there's always going to be some that are just not exactly going to align. There's going to be multiple tools and resources out there, and it sort of just depends on the organization and what they're required to produce and what it's for. So we do our best. I mean, I think a lot of times there is good alignment as far as where general priorities are across the state, but I don't know, it'll be tricky to figure out how to make that, how to just sort of narrow down, like only using one or only using another one, because again, it sort of comes back to what the purpose of that tool was to begin with, and where the funding is coming, and how it's meant to be used. So I like, just to be quite blunt, like the Colorado State Forest Service will continue to use the Forest Action Plan to help guide us. That might align and work well with other priority, you know, tools and maps and pods and things, but we can't just be like, we won't use that. We'll use whatever somebody else developed, or we'll, you know, because it's required. So, and again, if there's any questions about the social vulnerability index we have on our Forest Action or our Forest Atlas, we do have, you can click on the layers and you can look at what those mean. And we have sort of a description of how that was developed and what categories went into that. And I can also share the sort of report with anyone on the committee if they're interested.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Diana. I think that's a great point too. Of the goal of this is not to change the direction of any one agency or entity. And it's actually great if the different entities like the State Forest Service, the water utilities, the fire protection districts all come to these processes with their own map. I think that actually helps the process, because we can articulate what our different priorities are and different strategies are in a similar language, right? And put them, I think what we're trying to do is help people put all those together in a local context. So I hear that a lot of people are like, oh, do we need another one? I think the more that each entity and each sort of user group or community of practice can put things together, I think that's actually helpful and not something we should shy away from. So let me put up just a little bit of the stages of readiness, which will also tee up Katie later to talk about the CSU proposal. We got the right screen on there. So it's a framework that, you know, helps identify the critical components as well as some benchmarks of success at each stage. And I think we just heard many of these different stages, where one is just to establish a community of partners around a shared vision. And so that's, you know, just getting people together and aligned, because a lot of times different entities and people are out there doing their own work, but they're not as necessarily talking to other people and neighboring entities or things like that. Having, you know, the forest managers talk with the fire managers, talk with the recreation managers and things like that. And then translating that vision into a strategy I think that's where we heard Commissioner Cooper talking a little bit of, they have people at the table, they're talking, and now they're trying to translate, okay, what actions are we actually doing? Right? What's going to do a strategy that we can all get behind that's going to protect the things that we want to protect and manage the forest in a way that we can coexist with it. And then the next step is taking that, of course, to action, right? And once you have to action, how do you actually take the actions to a scale that's going to make an impact, that's going to change the direction of the forest that you're trying to impact? So these are sort of the main components, and there's, components that we've identified with this, as well as then some benchmarks where you can say, okay, this is going to look different everywhere, but here's some things that indicate you're heading in the right direction and achieving sort of these different stages. And these can help then, guide either funding resources or just guide, I think more than focusing on the funding sources, funding on who to talk to at what stage to help move your group forward, right? As a Forest Health Council, that's what we're trying to provide. I'm going to click the next couple slides, have like a lot of text on them. So I'm just going to show them to show that there's a lot of details behind this rather than have you read it all, right? But here's some components that are identified at each of those stages that are coming together. And this is where Chaska is leading the effort of with CFRI, as well as lots of other partners of sort of starting to flesh this out. And it has been fleshed out a little bit more from the Northern Colorado Fireshed as a sort of learning lab. So there's critical components, and then there's also benchmarks that we're saying, here's some benchmarks that, some signs that you're reaching these different stages, which helps know, okay, now I've been talking with these people, now I need to talk with these people or do these other processes, right? That's sort of the goal of a lot of this. One other thing I will share that is something I've been working on. Can you all see this graphic? So this is something I've been of sort of, what are some of those key ingredients? Distill down. All right, so it's science informed and locally relevant. That's sort of what we want, not sort of national data that doesn't take into account those local conditions. Having a synthesis of that technical expertise with the leadership, making decisions together. That's a component of success there, where if you have just leadership and sort of local governments or agency that isn't working hand in hand with the technical experts, then either one can kind of get misdirected a little bit. Keeping those expectations for momentum with the groups really helps move it forward. And then, having all these maps and all this data transparent, really, like Commissioner Cooper is saying, if we have these trade-offs and they're transparent of here's how much we're going to pay for forest management, here's the transparency about what we expect these to do. That really helps groups kind of move forward. So that's a goal of a lot of these sort of processes. We talked a little bit about structured inclusivity of making sure lots of voices are heard, but also not that one voice dominates and directs every group. And there's, collaborative structures and collaborative governance that we can learn from around that. And then opening up that shared decision space that, like I just said, the State Forest Service or other U.S. Forest Service comes in with their own plans. But the more that it's a shared decision space, it actually opens up that opportunities for different kinds of forest management and different kinds of fire management, recreation management, all kinds of things that some people are sometimes hesitant about. But I think there's a lot of research that shows that the more that you share some of that it actually empowers the agency managers and line officers and politicians that are on the hook to make the decisions that are going to be most impactful and sort of expand some of that political cover. So those are two sort of resources, stages of readiness. That other graphic, the sort of keys to success, is a something I've been working on, actually a case study from our work in Chaffey County, but things that we found have worked in other places that should be out on our website this week. I was hoping to have it out by today, but happy to share some of that. So I think that's from my perspective, like we've identified some keys. There's lots of technical tools out there. We have sort of the stages of readiness. How do we communicate that as a framework for people around the state? So you can say, oh, I'm about here. Here are the things and the kinds of decisions I need to make. So then when you're throwing the alphabet soup of all of the tools and resources and data, you can help sort through like, nope, I'm going to need this in a year. Right now I need this tool. I think that's for me where I would like your help as a Forest Health Council. Like what can we provide to level the playing field across the state so people can make those decisions better?
Thanks, Brett. I am just pulling up our agenda to turn to some of our purpose, goal, and audience. And I think we've teed that up really nicely. John, I know you had your hand raised. Do you want to jump in before we transition to some of the language and
Yeah, so I don't know if I can share my screen. I literally wrote this in like 5 minutes, but am I able to do that or not?
I'm gonna stop here. I'll stop sharing and you can jump on.
Yeah, right. And this is just like super basic. It's not going to win any awards or anything like that, but I mean, this is kind of what I was, and obviously it wouldn't be on Excel. It'd look nice, and I don't know if you can see my screen or not, but like I mean, this is how simple it could be, like at least the beginning, and then we have links to the information that Brett was talking about. You know, I can't remember. You know, someone had expressed concerns about planning, mapping, and modeling, and like that was the first step. I mean, but something like this where it's like, you know, do this and then you go to this and then you do this and then you go to that, and then obviously, you know, these red pieces are links to some of the stuff that Brett was talking about, list of grants and partnership opportunities, you know, list of available data tools. I mean, things like that, so that if someone, and I don't need to share anymore, but if someone you know, had these questions, it's very easy workflow of what I need to do. And obviously this is me in 2 minutes. I mean, the brain power behind in this committee would obviously make this a lot better, but that's kind of what I was thinking. Nope, share again. Pause share. How do I turn on pause sharing? No, stop sharing.
And stop sharing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think those are great thoughts, John, that we can continue to explore, and maybe we take one, you know, just one step back to get on the same page. And I think we've had a lot of these discussions on the purpose, goal, and audience, and that will help us really dive into what would this document look like? Would it include a workflow? Would it include some of these pieces that we've brainstormed? Can you all see the agenda? At least I've tried to zoom it in a little bit for everyone.
Yeah, that's good, Amy.
Okay. And this is language that Brett and I had just taken a stab at, trying to give the group a starting point. So the purpose that we had proposed is that the pre-fire playbook will assist with positioning all areas and communities in Colorado to better leverage resources and be competitive at receiving funding to achieve effective forest health management. And I'll go ahead and read the goals, since I think these are pretty intertwined, in that the pre-fire playbook provides a starting point on how to access science-based modeling, existing resources and technical capacity, and statewide priorities to improve existing processes and pre-fire planning efforts. So no pride in authorship, but I want to open it up to the group to see if that, you know, what changes might you recommend, or do we think that this captures some of the discussion that we've had and seeing a need for this effort? And go ahead, Jody.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you for everyone who worked on this. I really think that it being concise and laid out, I like the 3 things of purpose, goal, and audience, and I think it's well done. I like it a lot, and appreciate everyone kind of getting it after all of our big discussions and having all these big ideas, to have it kind of brought into a concise thing is, or a few statements, is pretty powerful. And I like how you've done it. So I really don't have much to add. I just wanted to thank you and say that I like especially the range of stakeholders from individual to multiple agents, adjacent counties, because it kind of shares who we're trying to help. So well done. And I think I just want to thank you all. Thanks.
Yeah, good point, Jody. I'll just go ahead and read the audience since we can talk about all three together. That, based on some of our discussions at the last meeting, targeting this at the local government and community level while ensuring that the application would be broadly applicable to a range of stakeholders. So an individual could pick this up and digest it, and also up to multiple adjacent counties that may share the same national forest. So trying to keep it targeted, but also maintaining a breadth of its applicability. So other thoughts on sort of where we're at with the bones of this recommendation?
I just had a question about the title of the pre-fire playbook versus the forest health playbook. If that makes sense, because we have a post-fire playbook, so this would be a part of that. And maybe, pre-fire is a catchier phrase because it's scary, so people will pay more attention to it than forest health. I just missed that decision point. And I'm curious to hear, what people think about those terms of sort of pre-fire versus forest health.
That's a great point, Hillary. And some of this is just carried forward in some of our notes and discussions, but I do think that's open to discussion and feedback. I appreciate you bringing that up.
This is, sorry, this is Matt from the National Forest Foundation again. I think I like the brevity of it too. The only thing I would add is I feel like the purpose kind of really is focused on like generating funding for the work. But I guess I would just like think about, like, especially in the pre-fire context, like local governments, like one of the most significant things they can be doing is the land use planning and building codes, and sort of like sharing that knowledge between local governments. So it's not even that you need to have funding for it, but like sharing knowledge between local governments on what different counties are doing in terms of like requirements for people who develop in the WUI or building standards. Because really, if the goal, like one of the goals might be structure protection, and one of the most effective things you can do is just have that defensible space and the fire resistant building materials, rather than doing a lot of sort of active forest management. And I think the purpose could be more inclusive of that sort of like county local government knowledge share as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Matt. I've tried to emphasize that it could be used for funding, but also very much of just helping coordinate existing resources. And I think that goes back to the legislation for our Forest Health Council of what this committee is trying to do, of helping coordinate and direct all of the existing resources in a sort of coherent way to leverage them together. I do, to Hillary's point, I think I'm fine as far as pre-fire or forest health. We did talk about having a framework. I think this framework can work in a pre-fire, again, a during fire and a post-fire, immediate post-fire setting. And in the post-fire setting, the existing post-fire playbook could fit in as a resource to help coordinate and leverage resources, right? That's what it serves to exist right now. So this could be a larger umbrella, but also I don't want to make it more complicated that then we aren't able to finish it and make it useful.
Other thoughts from the group?
I mean, I guess, I think it does make sense to keep it, have the pre-fire, post-fire. During fire is a very specific playbook that I don't think we should dabble in because that's emergency management, and they don't really like it when we dabble in their responsibilities. But if I think there are still communities like mine out there that are really interested in focusing on the forest health component of it. And the more they learn about sort of the conditions of their forest, the more they, it's like the harm reduction approach. The more you provide access to tools that help with harm reduction on, substance abuse, the more you're likely to actually get treatment. So the more access you have to information about the conditions of your forest, I found here, the more likely the community is coming around to support of certain levels of landscape treatment, whereas before they weren't open to any levels of landscape treatment, just more the defensive space focus. So if we just keep the reference of forest health in there for those communities like mine that are, that need to be convinced that treatment is one tool that can be used effectively to both maintain forest conditions, resiliency, and be more prepared for wildfire, then we'll open this up. So you do that in the purpose. Maybe stick forest health somewhere in the goal. And then the audience could be those communities that are both looking for planning for wildfire mitigation and forest health assessments, or forest resiliency, or sorry, I'm not very good at wordsmithing on the dot. It takes me
Yeah,
out.
I like that, Hillary. I can try and make those tweaks, and then I wonder if too we can, to the extent that the broader Forest Health Council agrees with this recommendation, hopefully this document could really be nested as part of the Forest Health Council's efforts. So again, trying to connect it to broader than just pre-fire planning. So I'll try and make those tweaks and send around some updated language. Before we turn it over to Katie to give just a quick update on the proposal for building collaborative capacity, our next meeting is April 10th, the second Monday of April. And initially we had thought to turn back to some of our conversations about a Colorado equivalent potentially to the Water Restoration Initiative out of Utah. I'm wondering if we table that for one more month and continue to build on the momentum that we have with the pre-fire playbook, but I don't want to, I'm open it up to the group to see where we want to take the next meeting, whether we want to spend one more on the pre-fire playbook and get this recommendation off the ground, or bounce back to the database clearinghouse watershed restoration initiative equivalent conversation.
I support just focusing on the pre-fire playbook for the next meeting.
Me too.
Great. I think that makes a lot of sense, and that's where I'm leaning. So we'll, I think, continue the momentum that we've built here. I'll make some of these tweaks and can send around some of the updated language, and that'll help us springboard into more of an outline of what would be included in this document. And John, we can really pick up on your workflow concept, and we can keep that on the table to work through. But Katie, in just the last few minutes, I sent around the final proposal that CSU submitted last week. Can you give us just a quick high-level summary of that?
Yeah, I'll try and be super quick here. So that proposal that you all got is for the Warner College Dean's Transdisciplinarity Grant. But just as kind of overview, like we picture this being step one in a much broader effort to try and increase collaborative capacity at a statewide level. So essentially it's got 3 parts to it. It would be to create a situation assessment to understand like the current need and potential for building collaborative capacity across the state and trying to understand like where different groups are at and what resources are available. And then we would be hosting 3 workshops over the course of the next year to create this larger plan for capacity building across Colorado. And then the third thing would be that we're kind of trying to develop the stages of readiness framework that Brett had talked about, trying to further develop that into a tool that we can actually then apply to groups across the state. So I feel like this group is definitely aligned with all of these topics. So I think both each of us as individuals could be involved in this, but also the Forest Health Council as a whole could be kind of a partner in this, because it's really going along these same lines of like identifying where people are at, identifying what resources they might need at those different levels, and then trying to figure out like, how do we actually get them there? So that's super broad because we only have 2 minutes left, but if anyone has any like questions or if you want to get in touch to learn more about it, please go ahead and follow up. I think it's a really interesting concept. Hopefully it gets funded. Even if we don't get this particular grant, we've got all these ideas going in this general direction. So I think you should stay tuned either way.
Thanks, Katie. Do you have a sense of and you might have mentioned this, the timeline of the funding decision for if this moves forward?
Yeah, it's a pretty quick turnaround. I think the funding decision would come in like May or June, because then the timeline would be to hire a research associate to kind of kick it off in June.
Okay, yeah, that is a quick timeline. And I do think there's some good synergies in that proposal to some of the discussions we've had in this group. So it's nice to have the link with you and Brett to keep us updated on that proposal. And I think there's lots of opportunities to collaborate and provide feedback.
Yeah, I think so too. And I can give more updates at a later time for sure when we have a little more time to talk.
That would be great. Thank you for being willing to do just the rapid fire couple-minute update. Well, thanks everyone for joining. I think we made some great progress and I'm looking forward to talking with everyone next month. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.